Nestled between tree-lined streets and well-manicured lawns, our suburban neighborhood exudes a picture-perfect charm that feels almost idyllic. The houses, each distinct yet harmoniously designed, boast vibrant flower beds and pristine mailboxes, all meticulously aligned. This curated aesthetic is not purely by accident, it's the result of the Homeowners Association, or HOA, which plays a pivotal role in maintaining community standards. The HOA is known for its strict guidelines, governing everything from the color of your front door to the height of your grass. While many appreciate the efforts to keep our neighborhood looking its best, there are those who view the HOA as an overbearing presence. This is where our story begins, as I find myself at odds with one particularly vocal member, an archetypal Karen whose mission seems to be enforcing her interpretation of perfection. In this community, the HOA meetings serve as both a platform for grievance and a battleground for opinions. Here, residents voice concerns about everything from noisy pets to questionable landscaping choices. The atmosphere can often feel tense, especially when disagreements arise regarding what constitutes acceptable behavior or attire in public spaces. It's within this context that my backyard pool became the center of an unexpected controversy. For me, the pool represents more than just a refreshing escape on hot summer days, it symbolizes freedom and relaxation in an otherwise structured environment. Little did I know that this oasis would soon put me in the crosshairs of the HOA Karen, whose zealous commitment to community standards would set off a chain of events neither of us anticipated. As I settled into my lounge chair one sunny afternoon, I couldn't have foreseen how quickly tranquility would turn into turmoil, all thanks to one neighbor's obsession with control. I'm an ordinary homeowner in this picture-perfect neighborhood, but my backyard pool is anything but typical. For me, it's not just a luxury, it's a sanctuary. As summer rolls in, the sun blazes overhead, and the temperatures soar, my pool transforms into my personal oasis. The moment I step outside, the sight of the shimmering water glistening under the sun calls to me like a siren song. It's where I unwind after long workdays, escape from daily stresses, and enjoy quality time with family and friends. Every splash echoes laughter, every float becomes a mini vacation. I love hosting gatherings, barbecues, birthday parties, or simply lazy afternoons lounging on pool floats with a good book in hand. The vibrant blue water invites neighbors over for impromptu dips and casual chats that foster community spirit. In my mind, this pool isn't just an addition to my property, it's a lifeline that brings joy and connection to those around me. But beyond leisure, my pool represents freedom, a space where I can reclaim my time and relax as I please. In a neighborhood governed by rules and regulations, it stands as a declaration of individuality amidst conformity. While some might see it as an eyesore or an infringement on community standards, to me, it embodies the essence of summer bliss. As I float lazily on warm afternoons, sipping iced tea and watching the clouds drift by, I feel at peace. Little did I know that this simple pleasure would soon invite scrutiny from the HOA Karen, igniting a conflict that would test my resolve and redefine my understanding of community. What I thought was just another summer day would soon turn into a battle for my cherished retreat, a fight that would reveal more than just differences over property lines. When you think of a neighborhood enforcer, one name immediately comes to mind, Karen. The moment she stepped into the community, her presence was impossible to ignore. With a perfectly coiffed bob and oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, she exuded an air of authority that many found both amusing and intimidating. Karen was not just any homeowner, she had appointed herself the unofficial guardian of our HOA rules, patrolling the streets with an eagle eye for anything she deemed out of line. Her motivations were clear. Karen believed that maintaining property values and community standards was her calling. Yet, beneath her polished exterior lay a need for control that often bordered on obsessive. Whether it was a neighbor's choice of landscaping or the color of their mailbox, nothing escaped her scrutiny. She thrived on the power her position granted her, wielding it like a badge of honor as she reported perceived violations with glee. As the summer progressed and my pool became a focal point for neighborly gatherings, Karen's gaze turned toward me. It wasn't long before she approached my backyard with a frown etched across her carefully made-up face, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her concerns about my pool were couched in faux politeness, but the underlying criticism was unmistakable. To her, my sanctuary represented everything that was wrong with loose standards in our neighborhood, a glaring deviation from her vision of perfection. What Karen didn't seem to understand was that her self-appointed role as the HOA's vigilante would soon lead to unexpected consequences. As I prepared for summer fun in my beloved pool, I had no idea that this seemingly harmless woman would become my greatest adversary, one who would stop at nothing to bring down my outdoor retreat and enforce her version of community ideals. Little did she know that the battle lines were being drawn in ways neither of us could foresee. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that beckoned everyone outdoors. I had just finished setting up my backyard for a small get-together when I spotted her, Karen, striding toward my property with purpose. Her expression was one of fierce determination, and my heart sank as I realized that this would not be a friendly visit. As she approached, I could sense the storm brewing beneath her surface. "We need to talk," she declared, arms crossed defensively. I offered a polite smile, but she didn't reciprocate. Instead, she launched into a tirade about my pool, claiming it was an eyesore that violated HOA regulations. "You know there are strict guidelines for what can and cannot be in our backyards," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I tried to interject, explaining that I had thoroughly reviewed the HOA rules and found no mention of restrictions on residential pools. But Karen was relentless. She cited various codes, none of which existed, as if reciting from an invisible handbook of her own creation. It became clear that her disdain for my pool stemmed not from any documented rule, but rather from a personal bias against anything that disrupted her vision of suburban perfection. "What about the noise?" she demanded, pointing a finger accusingly. "What about your guests tracking water and leaving debris everywhere?" Her concerns were exaggerated and unfounded. My gatherings were casual and respectful, with everyone aware of keeping the area tidy. As she continued to rant, I felt frustration boiling within me. This was not just a debate over pool aesthetics, it was an attack on my right to enjoy my home as I saw fit. With every word Karen uttered, it became increasingly clear that this confrontation was only the beginning of an escalating conflict, one that would test my patience and resolve as a homeowner determined to defend my sanctuary against her unwarranted scrutiny. In the days that followed my confrontation with Karen, it became painfully clear that she wasn't going to back down. Instead of letting the matter rest, she launched a full-scale campaign against my pool, rallying support from other residents who shared her rigid views on community standards. It felt like I was in the middle of a neighborhood soap opera, and I was the unwilling star. Karen began by knocking on doors, armed with her self-proclaimed list of grievances. She painted my pool as a disruptive element, claiming it attracted rowdy guests and created an unsightly mess. With each resident she spoke to, her narrative grew more exaggerated. I could hear snippets of gossip making their rounds, stories about wild parties and loud music that had never actually happened. It was as if she had created an alternate reality where my peaceful retreat had morphed into a chaotic nightclub. Before long, I started receiving letters from the HOA, each one echoing Karen's complaints. She had taken it upon herself to file formal grievances against me, citing violations that existed solely in her imagination. Each notification felt like a personal attack, an assault on my right to enjoy my home as I wished. The tension in the neighborhood escalated, with some residents siding with Karen while others quietly expressed their support for me but were too afraid to speak up openly. At HOA meetings, Karen became increasingly vocal, pushing for rules that would directly impact my pool. Her relentless pursuit seemed fueled by a mix of righteousness and personal vendetta, as if removing my pool would somehow restore order to the universe in her eyes. I wanted to confront her at these meetings, to set the record straight and defend my sanctuary, but I often found myself at a loss for words in the face of her fervor. As the stakes grew higher and more residents became embroiled in this petty drama, I realized that this battle was no longer just about a pool, it was about community dynamics and personal freedoms, setting the stage for an inevitable showdown between Karen and me. Determined to defend my beloved pool, I knew I had to take action. The first step was to dive into the HOA regulations. I spent hours poring over the community guidelines, combing through every clause and rule, armed with a notepad and a highlighter. To my relief, I found nothing that explicitly prohibited residential pools. In fact, the guidelines encouraged homeowners to enhance their properties as long as they maintained the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood. With evidence in hand, I began to gather support from my neighbors, those who had either enjoyed my pool parties or simply appreciated the joy it brought to our community. I organized small gatherings at my house, inviting friends and sympathetic residents over for barbecues and poolside chats. As we mingled in the sun, it became clear that many shared my perspective. The pool was not just an eyesore but a source of fun and connection. I also decided to document everything: photos of my well-kept yard, testimonials from neighbors who enjoyed spending time at the pool, and records of my adherence to all other HOA guidelines. My goal was to create a comprehensive defense that could counteract Karen's exaggerated claims. It was essential for me to demonstrate that I was a responsible homeowner who valued both my property and our community. As I prepared for the next HOA meeting, I approached a few residents who were willing to stand by me publicly. Their support bolstered my confidence and provided me with additional ammunition against Karen's relentless quest. Together, we crafted a united front that emphasized community spirit over petty grievances. The night of the meeting arrived, and as I sat among friends and supporters, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. This would be my chance to present my case, to advocate for my right to enjoy my pool without fear of retribution. Even if Karen believed she was upholding community standards, I was ready to show her, and everyone else, that enjoying one's home should always be celebrated, not condemned. The tension in the neighborhood reached a boiling point one fateful afternoon. I had just returned home from a meeting with the HOA, where I presented my case regarding my pool. Though I felt empowered by my defense, it was clear that Karen was not going to take defeat lightly. Little did I know, she was concocting a plan that would soon backfire spectacularly. That evening, I received a frantic phone call from a neighbor. "You might want to check on Karen," they urged, sounding panicked. "Her basement is flooding." Confused, I rushed over to her house, only to find a scene straight out of a disaster movie. Water was gushing out from her basement door like a waterfall, cascading down her driveway. As I approached, Karen stood outside with a mix of fury and disbelief painted across her face. It turned out that in her zeal to undermine my pool and rally support against me, she had inadvertently neglected her own property. A broken pipe had burst in her basement, and instead of addressing the issue directly, she had chosen to focus all her energy on sabotaging my backyard oasis. While emergency services arrived to help mitigate the damage, the irony of the situation struck me hard. Here was the self-appointed guardian of community standards, whose obsession with policing my pool had led her to overlook significant maintenance issues at her own home. As she shouted at contractors and frantically tried to redirect water away from her property, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. In that moment of chaos, as water poured out like an unwelcome guest at her door, it became abundantly clear: sometimes, attempting to tear others down only leads to your own downfall. Little did Karen know that while she focused on plotting against me, life had its own way of delivering justice, one that would ultimately shift the dynamics of our ongoing conflict. As news of Karen's flooding incident spread through the neighborhood, reactions varied wildly. Some residents rushed to her aid, genuinely concerned about the chaos unfolding at her home. They brought towels, buckets, and even fans to help mitigate the damage. It was heartwarming to see neighbors come together, demonstrating that despite our differences, many still valued community support in times of need. However, not everyone approached the situation with sympathy. A number of residents found a certain humor in the irony of Karen's predicament. Whispers and chuckles circulated as they recounted how she had spent weeks trying to rally the neighborhood against my pool while neglecting her own home. "Karma's a funny thing, isn't it?" one neighbor remarked with a smirk, shaking their head in disbelief. While I felt a twinge of guilt for enjoying the irony of Karen's situation, I couldn't deny that her relentless pursuit to undermine my happiness had created a palpable divide among us. Those who had aligned with her were left awkwardly grappling with their support for her crusade against my pool. Meanwhile, others who had been hesitant to intervene previously felt emboldened to voice their opinions about Karen's behavior, sharing their frustrations about her overreach and obsession with HOA rules. The atmosphere in our usually quiet neighborhood became charged with a mix of tension and levity. Conversations shifted from Karen's complaints to discussions about the importance of community and mutual respect. Many residents began questioning whether enforcing strict standards was worth sacrificing friendships and harmony within our little enclave. As I stood on the sidelines watching this unfold, I realized that while Karen's actions had sparked conflict, they also illuminated deeper issues within our community. Perhaps there was a chance for growth and understanding through this ordeal, a way to redefine what it meant to be good neighbors in a place where individuality could coexist with collective harmony. As the chaos unfolded at Karen's home, I found myself standing on the periphery, watching the scene with mixed emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of vindication. On the other, I couldn't ignore the sheer desperation etched across her face as she struggled to manage the flood. Despite our ongoing conflict, the sight of a neighbor in distress stirred something within me, a flicker of empathy that prompted a shift in my perspective. In that moment, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I would help her. Swallowing my pride, I walked over to where she stood, water seeping into her shoes and panic swirling in her eyes. "Karen," I called out gently. "Do you need any help?" Her expression shifted from disbelief to confusion, as if she couldn't fathom why I would offer assistance after everything that had transpired. With a hesitant nod, she accepted my offer. Together, we began shuttling buckets of water out of her basement. It was hard work, and the silence between us was thick with unspoken tension, but gradually, we found ourselves exchanging small talk amidst the chaos. As we worked side by side, I could see the vulnerability beneath her tough exterior. The weight of her self-imposed responsibility as neighborhood enforcer had clearly taken its toll. Through our shared efforts, something unexpected began to happen. We both let down our guards just a little. I learned about her family and the pressure she felt to maintain appearances in our community. In return, I shared my own stories about why my pool was so important to me, not just for relaxation but as a place for connection and joy. That day marked a turning point in our relationship. While we were far from friends, there was a newfound understanding between us, an acknowledgement that even amid conflict, kindness could bridge divides. It was a reminder that sometimes life has a way of forcing us to confront not just our differences but also our shared humanity. In the days following our unexpected collaboration during the flooding crisis, a subtle shift occurred in the dynamics of our neighborhood. As Karen and I continued to work through the aftermath of her basement disaster, we found ourselves exchanging courteous nods and brief conversations that felt less charged than before. The shared experience had fostered an uneasy truce between us, one built on a newfound understanding of each other's humanity. At the next HOA meeting, as tensions ran high over other issues, I decided to address the group. Karen sat across the room, her expression unreadable. "While we all want to uphold our community standards," I began, "it's important to remember that we're neighbors first. We should support each other rather than tear each other down." I glanced at Karen, who nodded slightly in agreement. In an unexpected turn, Karen stood up next. "I realize now that my passion for maintaining our neighborhood's appearance may have blinded me to what truly matters, our relationships as neighbors," she said, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "I apologize if my actions have caused any distress." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone processed her words. It was a rare moment of humility from someone who had always positioned herself as the enforcer of rules. I could see some residents shifting in their seats, unsure of how to respond. As we continued discussing community matters that evening, there was a palpable sense of camaraderie that hadn't existed before. Neighbors began sharing ideas about organizing community events, potlucks by the pool, garden tours, and cleanup days that would bring us together more than ever. The conflict over my pool faded into the background as we collectively focused on building a stronger community spirit. It became evident that while disagreements might arise, it was our ability to come together, through kindness, understanding, and shared experiences, that truly defined us as neighbors. That uneasy truce had blossomed into something much more valuable, a renewed commitment to supporting one another in our vibrant community. As I sit by my beloved pool on a warm afternoon, sipping a cold drink and watching the sunlight dance across the water's surface, I can't help but reflect on the tumultuous journey that brought me here. The conflicts with Karen, once a source of frustration, have transformed into valuable lessons about community dynamics. What began as a battle over property lines evolved into a deeper understanding of what it means to live in close quarters with others, especially in a tightly regulated neighborhood. I've learned that conflict is often rooted in misunderstanding and fear. Karen's attempts to impose her vision of order stemmed from her desire to maintain a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Yet, as we navigated our differences, it became clear that open communication was the key to bridging our divides. The moment we started talking rather than accusing, sharing rather than defending, everything began to shift. Living under the watchful eye of an HOA can feel restrictive at times. Rules are put in place to foster harmony, but they can also stifle individuality and create friction among neighbors. It's easy to forget that behind every complaint lies a person with their own story and struggles. My experience has taught me that fostering community goes beyond adhering to guidelines. It involves empathizing with one another and recognizing the importance of flexibility. Now, as I host gatherings around my pool, where laughter echoes and connections flourish, I am reminded of the power of kindness and understanding. Each splash in the water symbolizes not just joy but also the resilience of community spirit. We have the ability to learn from one another, grow together, and create an environment where everyone feels valued. Ultimately, this journey has reinforced my belief that true community is built on trust, respect, and open hearts. While challenges will inevitably arise, it's how we choose to face them that defines us as neighbors and friends. Together, we have emerged stronger, our bonds fortified by shared experiences and newfound appreciation for one another. As I sit back and reflect on the whirlwind of events that unfolded over my pool, I can't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Who would have thought that a backyard oasis could spark such drama? It's a classic tale of personal freedom colliding with community expectations, and let's just say, I now have a front row seat to the comedy that is suburban life. In our quest for harmony, we often forget that a little bit of individuality can go a long way. Karen's fervent attempts to enforce what she deemed proper living inadvertently led to an awakening for many of us. We learned that while it's important to respect community guidelines, it's equally vital to embrace the quirks and personalities that make each of us unique. After all, isn't that what makes life interesting? Now, I find myself hosting pool parties with an eclectic mix of neighbors, each bringing their own flair to the table, whether it's Karen's infamous potato salad or the family next door blasting music from their speakers. It's a delightful blend of personalities and preferences, reminding me that we can celebrate our differences while still finding common ground. As we navigate the delicate balance between personal freedoms and community standards, I've come to appreciate the humor in our situations. Sometimes, it takes a flood in Karen's basement or a silly dispute over a pool to remind us not to take ourselves too seriously. Life is too short for rigid rules and endless complaints. So here's my takeaway: let's embrace our individuality while respecting the shared spaces we inhabit. Whether you're lounging by your pool or marching into an HOA meeting armed with regulations, remember that kindness and laughter can dissolve even the most stubborn conflicts. After all, we're all just trying to find our place in this quirky little neighborhood, one splash at a time.